Okay, welcome everyone to the next session of AI Week Optimizing AI Costs on OCI, Right Sizing AI for JD Edwards. I'm Charles Anderson. I'm the lead JDE cloud engineer at ERP Suites, and I've been working with OCI since 2018, pretty much since it released. And I am OCI certified architect associate and a JD Edwards CNC 9.2 certified person, if you want to call it that. Let's see here. Like it's just me. Scott was here with me yesterday. The objective for this presentation is going to be showing deploying AI solutions on OCI and the capabilities that it offers for enhancing JDE. But really, it's more than just JDE. And a lot of this presentation will apply to any services that you deploy to OCI, or really in general to any public cloud in certain aspects. So we're going to go over some examples of AI deployments built on serverless architecture in OCI and integrated with E1, although you can expand that. Hi, Scott. Looks like you just joined there. You can expand that to include non-JDE applications, or even build a standalone AI application on OCI. It's geared more towards technical users. I do get into some details on the billing and costing aspects of any service within OCI, but I'm not a FinOps person. I don't have a finance background. I'm not an accountant, but having worked with JD Edwards for 20 plus years and having worked with accountants and CFOs, et cetera, after a while, that stuff starts to bleed over a little bit. So hopefully this will provide a practical cost framework to help you when you're looking at developing or architecting an AI solution on OCI. So one of the first resources you want to look for, if you have not seen it before, is the Cloud Cost Estimator. It's a free website. You don't have to even log into Oracle with an account to use the website. It does give you the ability to go out and pretty much estimate the cost of any AI service or non-AI service within OCI. There are configurable drop-down menus. You can edit the number of hours per month, for instance, that you want to operate the system. Say the default for autonomous database is a full month. You get the cost there. You can edit that and say, I only want to run this during the week. I want to give it the weekend off. You can do that, or if you only want to run it 12 hours a day. The same can be said for the digital assistant. Excuse me, I'll go back. The digital assistant. You will find that a single Oracle digital assistant is not inexpensive. It's not a trivial cost when you look at running it 744 hours per month. But if you were to reduce that to 200 or 300 hours, 400 hours, the cost goes down significantly because you're only paying for what you use. It's a pay-as-you-go model, and there can be some additional savings there, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So the question is, why right-size AI on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure? Really, why right-size any service on OCI? We have some slides to go through here. The primary points are to reduce your operational expense with pay-as-you-go billing, to meet latency and throughput service level objectives, to respect the OCI soft limits or service limits. Those are there for a reason. You do need to request to have a service limit increased in certain cases, and you have to know about that ahead of time, but we'll get into that a little bit later as well. Obviously, you want to avoid surprise quota ceilings. Looks like we got a little bit of error there, but no big deal. And align your AI spend with your business objectives and KPIs. So reducing your OpEx run rate, with pay-as-you-go billing. You want to avoid the commit or lose it risks. If you're not using it, you're still being billed for it. That's the bottom line. So That's true for pretty much any service in OCI. If you stop it, in most cases, you're only going to pay for the storage that you've used. So if you upload a terabyte of data to the system and you're not using the database and you shut it down, you're not going to be billed for CPU and memory utilization that can go to some other customer or sit idle, but you won't be billed for it if you're actually shutting it down, but you do get billed for that storage. So oversizing your system obviously leads to direct avoidable cost increases. And that happens a lot because you don't want to have an undersized system. You don't want to have that unexpected uh-oh moment of, hey, performance is really bad. So you might be tempted to throw more hardware at it than you need, but then that's going to hit your bottom line at the end of the month. And you can actually see that throughout the month. It's a near real time meter that you can go out and look at in the OCI console. So there shouldn't be any surprises, especially when you first spin up a service, any service in OCI. You kind of want to know, hey, what's this costing us? And you'll see that there's a dramatic difference between a Linux compute instance or VM compared to running a full-on generative AI service, for instance, a compute cluster with multiple GPUs in it. The cost is dramatically, wildly different between those two data points there. But you can see all of that in the cost and billing console. So obviously, why it matters to avoid those cost overruns, and best practice would be to start with a minimal configuration and scale it up gradually. Monitor usage with the native cost analytics and tag services for the chargebacks that you might have. There are some tagging features in OCI, and there's a special cost tag that you can apply to services, and that really helps when you're looking at the cost analysis. So the next slide here, meet latency and throughput, SLOs or service level objectives. It's not just about shrinking what you have. It's about making sure that it's sized appropriately, that you don't have to have those midnight emergency alerts that, hey, performance is bad or the system is down, it can't function, but also that you're not sitting there being billed $100,000 a month for something that you only need $10,000 a month of service for instance. So it's important to understand OCI service shapes and also how, and this goes back to the cost estimator website, but how Oracle comes up with the billing metrics for each service. It does vary. So how you get charged for the database services versus a digital assistant, which is a managed service, versus both of those, the autonomous database, digital assistant, all managed services, but how they meter that is different. And the number of transactions per second could be different depending on whether or not it's a production instance or a development instance, for instance. And you want to avoid those cold starts where recently accessed data is not in memory and performance is low. And you see that with traditional on-premises systems. It's not something that's unique to Oracle Cloud or public cloud. It could be any system where if you have data that you're not keeping in memory and you shut the system down, you bring it back up, it's slow the first time. And that can happen with transactions where those first API calls could be slow. Again, respecting those service limits or those soft limits. You'll find out working for the first time with several OCI services that the service limit for, say, a generative AI cluster would be 0. So you're not even allowed to build an AI cluster unless you ask permission. Like, pretty please, can I have a OCI generative AI cluster? You put in a service request for that. You tell them how many you want, and they will, in turn, usually within about 24 hours, turn that around for you. But if you don't have that service limit set beforehand and you're in production and you hit at peak time of the month and you have to put in a ticket to get that, it's not going to be looking good on you if you haven't done your homework on what the peak performance requirements are going to be. So again, avoiding errors is not just about uptime. It's about reflecting on yourself and on your department your IT readiness and to save fire drills and make your business successful. Really, not just about yourself or your department. It's about making the business successful. So, how do service limits work? Obviously they're in there for a reason. Is to protect that shared multi-tenant capacity. So when you're in the public cloud, you're sitting out there, even if it's a serverless architecture, you're still using services that are running on servers that could be accessed by other customers at any given time. And if you're just sitting out there running something idle 24/7, that's not very efficient. So they want to make sure that before you go out and deploy it, that you actually know that you need it. And that's just a soft cap. It's just a way to reduce those types of over provision types of situations. So if traffic exceeds the default, you might get an HTTP 429 too many request error. You don't want to see that, especially in a mission critical application. And again, you can increase those on the OCI console under the governance administration page, the limits and quotas usage screen. Again, in the OCI administration console, in the past few weeks, they have made some changes to the console, so it might look a little bit different today than it did a few weeks ago, but things should be generally in the same place. But if it's not, search is your friend. You should be able to find pretty much anything with the search feature in the OCI console. And then lastly, to align your AI spend with business value. So you can provide real-time cost visibility, and we've had to do that internally at ERP Suites as well. Hey, how are we doing with AI spend? So we have AI projects, and we have OCI services spun up. Some of them running 24/7, and what's that doing to our bottom line? And being able to go out there in the console and provide a real-time feedback to the finance person and say, hey, this is what we're spending in this area. And then it's good to compartmentalize things, tag things, compartmentalize things for that chargeback if you have to deal with that. Maybe you just have one big budget and you're just looking at, hey, how can we reduce costs? But you might have a shared services model where you're charging back to departments based on their percentage of utilization, and the tagging becomes really key in that type of a scenario. So it's a good feature to have and be aware of and to implement it. It doesn't get turned on by default. You have to go in there and opt into those types of things. So some optimization strategies that you can deploy with OCI. The auto start shutdown is not an automatic feature that you get. You have to go out and develop it. That's something that an ERP Suites could help you with. You could go out and do some research on your own. You might use your favorite AI assistant to do some research on that. But the bottom line is you need to deploy OCI functions and events if you want to implement something like that, where it's starting and stopping on demand or by your schedule, basically. So if you want to make sure that the system's up by 5 a.m., then you can do that. Otherwise, you're going to be billed for it, 24/7, as I mentioned before. Flexible shape scaling GPU count down after training. That would only apply if you have a Gen AI cluster. I think most of the JD Edwards customers that we would talk to probably aren't ready for that. And if you're not even using AI yet, you're probably not beyond a small scoping effort, proof of concept, prototype environment. In those cases, you really want to be looking at serverless architectures and not looking at dedicated clusters. That's something that confused even us when we started looking at this a year or two ago, which is, hey, what do we need to be able to start developing on the system? And do we need a production cluster or not? Do we need to be training our own data? Can we do some of this with data warehouse and machine learning? And do we actually need dedicated GPUs? And it turns out, hey, with what we're doing, with the project that we've been working on and the proof of concepts that we've been putting together for customers, we actually don't need that right now. So over time, it's just a matter of every customer, ourselves included, needs to look at their own business requirements and determine, is this actually needed before we go out and request a service limit increase and go out and deploy that service? Because otherwise, you deploy that service, you might set it and forget it. It's just going to be sitting there running and no one's actually using it. You see that show up in your cost analysis. You see that in your bottom line every month. Hey, why is our operational expense so high? And no one knows. But You might call back and say, hey, oh yeah, that's that AI service. We need that. But in reality, you might not even need that much. You might be over provisioned, et cetera. So it's really, really good to take a hard look at that. Again, those tags, you can tag by environment. You say, hey, this is a dev, test, or prod system for your compartmental budgets. Budgets, again, that's something that you can apply. It's not enabled by default, but you can go in and say, hey, I can go out and look at the last 3 months, for instance, of a AI spend or OCI, overall OCI spend in a compartment. Okay, that's my budget threshold. Okay, now if I go maybe 10 or 20% above that, then I want to get an alert on that. And again, you can implement that with OCI functions. You can basically you can build reports and you can schedule them to run. But you have to go out to the console to get those PDFs when it actually runs the report. There's no built-in solution, and this is not unique to OCI. AWS, I believe, has the same issue where you have to build a Lambda function if you want to email PDF to your inbox from the billing console. So just be aware of that. And I think some of that is just OCI hasn't been around as long as AWS, and a lot of these features and functions are kind of mirroring what AWS has. And it's just, to me, it's humorous that type of functionality isn't included and that it's kind of mirroring what AWS does. So not a knock on Oracle or OCI at all. Just to me, that's fun. Here's an OCI cost model overview. So not everyone, again, if you're just now starting out, you're not even in the prototyping phase yet, you're probably not going to require a generative AI dedicated endpoint, but you might be using a shared endpoint. You probably don't need a dedicated cluster. You probably don't need a GPU in a bare metal instance, for instance. You see that $4 per GPU hour, that adds up pretty quickly over the course of a month and a year. So you need to know, hey, do I need to be doing fine tuning right now? Do I have my model fine tuned already? Do I need that instance to be running or not? It's really key. It's like some things they're ephemeral, right? You only need them for a short period of time. So once you're done with it, turn it off, and you might reserve the instance. You might save the configuration, keep the data out there if you need it. Maybe just store a backup, that sort of thing. You don't necessarily need to have that instance running all the time. This is a reference architecture example, not ERP suites reference architecture, but just an example of what a small or medium or large AI implementation overall might look like, the number of daily tokens and then monthly costs associated with that. And you can see a small prototype environment, you're not going to spend a whole lot of money. This does not include like a digital assistant, for instance. A digital assistant cost that's a managed service. There's a lot more functionality built into that than just a generic chatbot, for instance. But the cost of a prototype environment where you have a limited number of tokens they might even give you for free is going to be much, much lower than an environment where you need to have a generative AI cluster, for instance, or you're doing enterprise RAG, the augmented retrieval. So again, this is just an example of what that cost might look like on a monthly basis. A very small prototype example. So you could implement a OCI function, just a bit of code sitting out there, right? That could be running in Kubernetes, for instance. They could call a GenAI shared endpoint, and you can have your data stored in object storage. You don't necessarily need to have it stored in a dedicated database. And then you could have the OCI API gateway securing embed access for that. And the first, say, for instance, OCI functions, the 2 million invocations are recorded as free. This is current as of April 2020. So GenAI tokens, etc. So the cost is pretty low for a really small prototype environment. But once you start getting into more advanced deployments, including the digital system, the cost isn't going to go. It's going to go up dramatically from there. And this is an example. This is not a quote or a commitment or a contract, but it's an example of what a digital assistant deployment might look like with address book and supplier master, customer master, who's who address book, trigger UBE, and the benefits, again, are listed there. You can read them, but to drive efficiency, reduce costs, automate tasks, etc. There would be a one-time setup fee for that, and you're going to have costs to develop, and you might capitalize that, and you're going to have the operational expense, the recurring operational expense that you're going to pay directly to Oracle for that. We're not reselling OCI services, so the cost for a digital assistant is going to be a lot higher than if you were to implement a small document understanding deployment. But once you start looking at, okay, what does our business need, that cost can grow exponentially. So you might look at, hey, we have certain amount of documents that we can scan up to a limit, and those are free, but that might get you through 2 days of the month. So that's when that cost starts to kick in. I think I skipped over the machine learning aspect, but if you have the autonomous data warehouse or autonomous transaction processing system, you could implement machine learning within that instance, especially if you have the license included option for the enterprise edition, that you can do machine learning in the database that gives you AI features, and the cost is listed there. So key takeaways for this: right size first. You always want to try to match the model size, throughput, and SLA to the business need, because you don't want to have unexpected surprises. You don't want to wake up and have a nastygram in your inbox or a phone call from your boss wondering why you've blown the budget on day 2 of the month. Move from a shared serverless architecture to a dedicated resource. You start small, then grow into what you need, and only deploy that when you need it. Don't just guess. You need to be looking at the bottom line. You need to be looking at the number of transactions that you estimate you're going to be processing, and hey, can we actually reasonably meet our SLAs with a shared system, or do we need dedicated hardware for that? And maybe there's a security concern as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a performance concern. It could be a security concern. Those can sometimes go hand in hand. Automate savings. Again, that's really key. It's not a feature that's enabled by default. You can't just go in there and click the easy button. You might have to develop a function to do that. But if you put the time in, you can see up to a 40 to 60% lower monthly bill. That's something that I think even ERP suites ought to be looking at doing in certain cases, is say, hey, why do we have these resources running 24 hours a day? Maybe they only need to be running 12 hours a day, and maybe we don't need to run this on the weekend unless we've got a project that's got a deadline coming up, that sort of thing. You can reap the rewards if you actually put the time. So there is some initial development costs, but once you have that code written, it's pretty much set and forget, right? Unless there's a API change, that stuff probably should just keep it continuing running. And then again, implement tagging and tracking. Make sure you're compartmentalizing within OCI, not putting everything in the root compartment. Make a compartment for your various divisions if you need to do that, and put tags on resources and use the cost tracking tags. Definitely will help there with the FinOps dashboards, and train your end users as well to be able to go out there and do self-service in that system. You don't necessarily want to depend on an IT person to always be there to provide that information. If you can train that finance person to go out and look at those reports themselves, or if you want to put the time in and, like I said, develop a function to have that report emailed to them, even better. And then you shouldn't have to worry about those phone calls. Leverage incentives. So I'm not going to give you a commitment here, but if you talk to your Oracle sales rep and you start looking at universal credit commitments, you might see a non-trivial or substantial rebate opportunity there. Obviously, there's always a downside to a commitment. You're committing to spend a certain amount, and if you don't, use it, you're still spending that, right? So the pay-as-you-go model can benefit you there, but you can get a discount. So it's a black art sometimes of determining, hey, what have we done in the past? What's next year? What's the next 2-3 years look like? Maybe we can save some money if we're going to stick on this platform. So that's what I have. It looks like we did a good 30-minute presentation here. If you have any questions, I don't see any comments in the session chat here, but I've done a lot of talking, so.
You can take a break. I'll cover for you for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really interesting, Charles. Thank you. I hadn't seen some of those costs, so good to see you actually talking some numbers. Anybody have any questions about that? Let's drop them in the chat and we'll see if we can answer them. Yeah, I know the one with the yellow or the yellow background. I was thinking I'll have to go in there and fix that for downloads so we can see it easier.
Yeah, I mean, and there's some of that I wanted to include just to give people an idea of what they're looking at, but it's going to vary based on their business needs, right?
Yep.
Every solution should be tailored to what you need. I can't stress that enough. It's really hard to have a cookie cutter price on some of these things, especially when you're talking about document understanding. Because, you know, you might be doing receipt processing, you might be doing sales order processing, and they're totally different. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this was helpful, and if it wasn't, promise to do better next time.
You can leave a bad review for Charles, and
yeah, that's right. All reviews are
I'll bring it up to him every day.
Helpful in one way or another. We can learn from our.
All right. Well, let me check the calendar here. We've got Mo should be wrapping up his as well, so we'll have a break, and then we have 2 sessions starting at 3:30. Sean for security, and then we have Jason from Oracle. He's given a longer hour-long session on Oracle Code Assist. That's right. So that should be nice and entertaining. And then if you're security, we'll have Sean. And then we added this a day or 2 ago, but the live customer panel. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, if you already set your schedule, that is now on there. That's our last session at 4:30. So we'll end with a half-hour session. We've got a couple customers coming on. Manuel Ward from Oracle will be there, help ask some questions and see if they are thinking what you all are thinking. All right.
Sounds good.
We'll wrap it up here, take a break, and then come back here in about a half hour.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, everyone, for attending.